Hi, I'm Jenny Fish from One Big Happy Yarn Company. Welcome to our Coral Cardigan Knit Along. This pattern is designed by Amy Christophers using Barocco Isola yarn. The skill level is listed as intermediate, and we have everything you need to knit with us at onebighappy.com. In this episode, we'll go over the pattern and supplies, cast on, then work the edging, and get started on the body portion. Let's get started. Okay, so the first thing is the pattern. The pattern comes in the Barocco Isola pattern book, along with the cardigan that we're going to be making, the Coral Cardigan. There are 5 other patterns, so there's a total of 6 patterns in this pattern book, and it's a mixture of knit and crochet. So you get a lot of bang for your buck with this, and this comes in the kit. And one thing I do want to talk about, when you order the kit, you'll be ordering by the size that you want to make. So just be sure to check that out as you're looking through the different options on the kit. Some of the supplies you'll need, of course, we'll be using the Barocco Isola yarn. You'll need 2 different needle sizes, a US size 3 and a US size 5. We'll be using a circular knitting needle, and you'll want about a 30-inch cord. Then your standard, you can also use double-pointed needles on a portion of the sleeves. So that would be in a size US 3. Tape measure, scissors, stitch marker, row counter, all that normal stuff. So those are some of your supplies. I do want to talk a little bit more about the Isola yarn. It is fantastic. It is a blend of cotton, linen, and viscose. And it is an ombre fade color. So when you get your balls of yarn, you'll notice that some of them may have a darker color on the outside and then fade into light, or the reverse, where it's lighter on the outside and darker on the inside. This will come into play later and works in with the sweater pattern. So we'll go over that as we go along. First things first, a gauge swatch. You're making a garment, so I highly recommend making a gauge swatch for 2 reasons. So if you don't know what a gauge swatch is, here's mine. And you just knit up a square piece of work. In this pattern, you're using the larger size needles, which is the US size 5. You are going to be measuring a 4-inch square section, so you want your gauge swatch to be bigger than that, so 5 to 6 inches. You knit this up, one, so you can count your stitches and your rows to make sure that they match the designer's size, so that when you make your garment, your stitches are matching, your garment will come out the right size. With the gauge swatch, after you have knit it, you want to go ahead and block it and get it 100% dry, and then measure your gauge, count your stitches. Because if there's any moisture in it, or if you haven't blocked it, you could come up with a different count. And in the pattern, it says she used the larger size needles on it and blocked it before she took her gauge. The gauge on this is 22 stitches and 30 rows in a 4-inch square. So you just, after you've blocked it, you lay it out, you measure, you count your stitches, you count your rows and you count your stitches in that 4-inch, and that'll get you on target. If you have too many stitches in your 4 inches, then you need to go to a larger needle size. If you don't have enough stitches in the 4 inches, then you need to go to a smaller needle size. Seems a little backwards, but that's how it is. That's how you get to adjust your gauge on that. Now, for me, the number one important reason why I make a gauge swatch is I want to test the fabric. I'm making a garment that I'm going to wear. I want to make sure that the fabric is a fabric that I want to wear. So that, for me, is a lot of the reason why I do a gauge swatch, and then I can measure to make sure that I'm matching the designer's stitch size. These patterns this pattern has a lot of so many inches, so that's why you got to match that gauge. Okay, enough about gauge, but I highly recommend it. Okay, let's get back to the yarn. I mentioned before, it's ombre, so you have dark on some, dark on the outside on some, dark on the inside on some. In this pattern, when we're casting on, we're told to use the contrasting color, so that's the opposite of the main color, and the darker side of that color. So you may have to pull from the inside of your ball or the outside of your ball. This yarn is super slick, super nice. So you're not going to have any tangles or anything. You can go either way on this ball. When you pull your yarn out, we're going to be using a long tail cast on. So to know the amount of stitches that you're going to cast on, refer to your pattern for the size that you're wearing. One of the other things I do want to start out right away, one of the things I highly recommend when you're using a pattern that has sizes in it, it's called a sized pattern. Make a personal copy and go through with a highlighter and highlight your size all the way through the pattern. And that way, when you're going along, you're not guessing, oh, wait, was it before or after the parenthesis? Was it before or after the bracket? You've got it highlighted in advance, and you can just see those numbers. I'm going to be knitting a small sample just to kind of show you the techniques and the steps as we go along. Always refer back to your pattern for the exact information that you need. This pattern is started at the bottom and worked up. So there's a lot of stitches that we're going to cast on in the very beginning. You have a couple of options there. I'm using the long tail cast on, and when I made mine, I used a bobbin I wrapped a bunch of yarn around that, and then I pulled from both the bobbin and my ball of yarn to do the long tail cast on, so I didn't have to go through and figure out how many stitches. I just kind of a little cheat there. But you can do the wrap method where you wrap the yarn around, let's say you're casting on 200 stitches, you can wrap the yarn around 20 times, take that measurement, then go until you get to 200. That's roughly where you'll want to start. Casting on, we're using the smaller size needle, the US size 3 needle for the cast on. This is for the edging. Okay, so you just go ahead and you slide your needle through the loop on your slip knot. You make it comfortably smooth. We're going to go back into the slingshot. Now, if you need help with the long tail cast on, we do have a stitch support video, and we'll put a link up here that you can click on. That'll give you a little bit more detail on this type of cast on. I'm going to go down and around and through, down and around and through. Now remember, you're using the darker side of your contrasting fabric to start this cast on, and you're casting on the number of stitches that coincide with the size that you are making. And this is all in the pattern book. So I'm going to cast on a few here just to give you guys an idea. Okay, so that's just a few. You'll have many, many more, but that's the long tail cast on. Then we're going to flip over and work row 1. Now, you're using circular needles, but you are knitting flat. You are not knitting in the round, so we're not going to join our work together. We're just flipping it over and starting to knit. Now, row 1 is designated as the wrong side. So what you might want to do when you get done with this one is put a stitch marker in, and I'll show you that when we get there, but we don't want to forget that, so we can designate which side is the wrong side and the right side. Because like my little trick of always my tail is on the right side is backwards in this project. So I actually went ahead and put a stitch marker in so I didn't get myself confused. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we're going to start the stitches for our edge. And it is the whole edge of the cardigan, which is this area right here all the way around, is 4 stitches of garter. So that means you knit on both sides. That's the garter ridge all the way around the band. I found, and this is just my personal preference, that I like a thicker band around. In this pattern, there is room if you want to change that a little bit and make it 8 instead of 4. You're perfectly fine to do that. It will not mess up the pattern, and it'll give you a thicker band. That's just a personal preference for me. Okay, so we're going to knit those band stitches. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, one of the things the pattern doesn't say is place a stitch marker here, but I found, just for my mind, placing a stitch marker when I'm done with those 4 stitches kind of keep me on track as I go through the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and put a stitch marker after those 4 stitches. Now, keep in mind, we are working on the wrong side of the work, and most of this cardigan is in stockinette. So what you do on the wrong side of stockinette is you purl. So now I'm going to purl to the last 4 stitches. Let's see here. And again, you'll have a lot more stitches on your needles when you do that. I'm just doing a little sample here so you can see all the techniques. Okay, I've got 4 stitches left. I'm going to go ahead and slide another stitch marker here. And that's going to help me keep on track of where my edging is. Okay, so I've finished row 1. That was the wrong side. I'm going to flip it over. Now I'm on row 2 and I'm on the right side. And I am going to go ahead, and there's just a little bit right down here. And you can wait till you get to the next one, but I just don't want to forget that this is the right side. So I just placed a little stitch marker there right in that bottom of that stitch. So now we're ready to start row 2. The first 4 stitches are in garter, so I'm going to go ahead and knit those. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to slide my stitch marker. Now I'm moving into the stockinette, and stockinette on the right side of the work, you knit. So I'm just going to continue knitting. Slide my stitch marker, and that sliding of the stitch marker that I'm doing, that is not indicated in your pattern because they didn't have you put these stitch markers in. It's a personal preference. You can use them or you can leave them out. I just like to have them as a guide for me. 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so that's the end of row 2. I know I don't have much work on here, but that's kind of what it looks like. We've got our garter ridge here, stockinette in the middle, garter here. So now we're going to flip over, and we are on row 3. Now we're going to start the ribbing portion, and it's super simple. We're going to knit these first 4 stitches. You'll always be working these in a garter stitch. So we're going to knit these. Slide that stitch marker. Now we're going to make, it's basically a 1-by-1 ribbing. We're going to purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, all the way across the section between the 2 stitch markers that I have here. So I'll show you that. Purl 1, knit 1, purl, and knit, all the way across. Okay, then you slide that stitch marker, and then you're going to knit those last 4 stitches. Knit, 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 knit. I was used to that purl, knit, purl, knit. I almost purled that one, so watch yourself there. The last 4 stitches, you just knit on here. Okay, so we've just finished that row. Go ahead and continue on. You'll need to build up this ribbing for a certain amount of inches. Just look at your pattern for the size that you're making. It'll let you know, and then we'll be ready to work on the body of the sweater. Okay, so on this sample, I've gone ahead and worked some of the ribbing here. The garter stitches are on each edge, and then I have the ribbing here in the center. I'm on the right side of my work. Now it's time to start the body. Now the pattern indicates at this point we're going to switch to our larger needles. For us, that's the size 5, so I have them here. The simple way to switch, don't worry about sliding all the stitches onto your new needle, just go ahead and knit them right on. So I'm just going to start knitting. This is my size 3 down here on the table, size 5 in my hand. I'm just going to start knitting. Now the first 4 stitches, I'm going to knit those to keep in that garter stitch. And now we're switching to stockinette, and I'm on the right side of my work, so I'm just going to knit all the way across. Okay, so I have finished this row. This is the right side of the work. This is stockinette, so I've knit on this side. Between these 2 stitch markers. Then when I flip it over on the wrong side of the work to keep it in stockinette, you purl across the stitches between the 2 stitch markers, but you're still going to be knitting both sides on the edges here. Now continue working the body until the pattern indicates that it's time to join in a new color. Then join me back here in the next episode as I walk you through changing colors. Then we'll work the right front, back, and left front portions of the Coral Cardigan. Remember, you can get a kit with the yarn and pattern book at onebighappy.com. Be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell to be notified every time we have a new video. Happy knitting!